All right, Chief. So I wanted to talk with you about the Perry case. We've been following that for past, I think, 8 or 9 days now. So many people who've seen our reporting or seen the body camera video ask why Clayton Perry, whom your officer found just feet away from a running Jeep, passed out in his yard, and the Jeep had been followed from a hit and run, why he wasn't arrested on the spot. From the video, it's clear your officer believed Perry had been the Jeep's driver and that he was intoxicated. He even mentions the matching description from the incident at Bill Miller Barbecue ahead of the crash. So what kept him from arresting Perry at that point?
So it's not so much what the officer believed at the time, it's what he knew at the time. And what he didn't know was from personal observation or from witness reports that Perry was the person behind the wheel. It wasn't until afterwards, at a later time, that the officer had the information that he needed to get an arrest warrant for Perry. So he couldn't put him behind the wheel, and he didn't have anyone saying that was the person behind the wheel. So that's why he wasn't arrested that evening. He tried, but he couldn't get Perry to acknowledge or admit that he had been behind the wheel.
You'd use the phrase probable cause, and a lot of people, I think, who saw that would think, wasn't that enough probable cause? You had a man lying with a gash on his head, seemingly intoxicated, in his own backyard with a Jeep just feet away, still running. How was that not probable cause after the officer knew that Jeep had been followed from the scene and he did have that matching description from Bill Miller?
That's a lot of circumstantial evidence that you could, that I think most folks think it gives you the probable cause to make an arrest, but it wasn't there. He did not have that direct information that he was behind the wheel.
Okay, what about why he wasn't tested for sobriety or breathalyzed, or why the officer, if he did believe it was the driver, or why he didn't try to get a warrant to get his blood alcohol content? I know he can't draw it there at the scene, but why he didn't try to get a warrant?
Because again, it all leads back to probable cause to make an arrest, make a search, do a search, and it wasn't there. You can't just check someone for their blood alcohol under the belief that they may have been driving a car. It's the same way when we stop somebody on the side of the road, or when we find a car on the side of the road and the driver may have climbed into the back seat and may be intoxicated. It's the same thing for there. There's no probable cause to know that person was driving the vehicle. It all boils down to that, whether or not there was probable cause to believe that an arrest could have been made on the scene. And if an arrest could have been made on the scene, then there would have been either the breathalyzer or the blood draw.
Could he have tried doing just a field sobriety test without the breathalyzer, doing the whole finger to nose sort of thing?
No.
You can't do that either?
Can't do that either.
Okay. Not even with, what he clearly believed to be the driver there?
If you can't put him behind the wheel, then you can't do the field sobriety tests.
As we have been reporting on this case, multiple stories over the past more than a week at this point, many of our viewer comments and replies online indicate that people think Perry got special or soft glove treatment. Did he?
He did not. And again, we all saw on the video that the officer tried very diligently to get Perry to acknowledge or admit that he was driving the vehicle, and he wouldn't do it. Had he done so, then he probably would have been arrested. So no, there's been no special treatment for Perry.
Did your officer know that Clayton Perry was a city councilman?
It didn't appear so from the video, and I haven't spoken to him directly about it, but it didn't appear so.
Was this handled differently at any point because of Clayton Perry's position as a city councilman? No,
and I think the other point that I've heard being talked about was the fact that he was allowed to turn himself in, and we give anybody that opportunity if their attorneys call and say, hey, I'd like to I'll bring my client down and have him booked. That's what was done with Perry. If he didn't present any danger to the community, there was no reason why he shouldn't have been allowed to turn himself in. Anybody would have that opportunity if their attorney were to call and request it. And we've done it in the past for many a person.
In your opinion, did the officer who responded to this incident and responded to Perry's home, did he handle the situation correctly?
I think he did a great job. And he absolutely handled it correctly. I think he did a great job.
Did Clayton Perry ever contact you or anyone in your office while this investigation was ongoing?
No.
He didn't try to reach out or use his influence in any way?
No.
Do you understand, though, why many of our viewers have doubts about how this went down? They seeing this video, seeing a city councilman, found in a state that many believe indicated he was intoxicated, and the Jeep still running, followed from the scene of a hit-and-run crash. Why they think there was a double standard there?
Sure, I can absolutely see that. But again, I think without the understanding of what it takes to make an arrest, I think it's easy to misunderstand why he wasn't arrested at the scene.
So what would you want to tell those people who are harboring doubts, who are thinking that SAPD went easy on Perry, that, would maybe let him get away with a possible DWI at that point?
Sure.
Or the hit and run charge, which came later?
No, I can tell you very, very simply that he was not given any special treatment because of his position, and the officer tried very diligently to get him to acknowledge that he was driving the car. He couldn't do that at the time.
Okay. Your office put out a statement last week saying that a DWI charge will be filed with the DA's office for them to review. Where does that investigation stand right now? As of yesterday, I believe the DA's office had said they had not received that charge.
Right. The detective is still putting the case together, and once he has everything that he needs to make that case, then that information will be given to the DA's office.
How do you prove DWI in a case like this, where there wasn't blood taken, there wasn't a field sobriety test, there wasn't a breathalyzer?
That's what the officer's building his probable cause. The detective right now is building the probable cause to hopefully make that case.
And how will this case work when, the phrasing of we'll file it with the DA's office? So you're not going to arrest Perry before you hand the case over to the DA's office. It will be up to them whether they want to press a charge. Is that a correct understanding?
You're talking about the DWI charge?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So we have what we believe is enough to make the case for the hit and run. We are submitting all the information that we have that may be able to prove that he was under the influence and that he was driving the vehicle.
Any indication on when that investigation may wrap up?
No, I don't have any. I don't have any information on that.
Okay.
Once the detective does his due diligence, then that case will be submitted to the DA.
What do you want to tell people who have been watching this case? It's been, a very high-profile story, high-profile arrest, all the way through from the time we first reported it on Monday. What do you want to tell people watching this about how your department handled this and how it's continuing to investigate?
I mentioned earlier that I thought the detective did a good job interviewing Perry, and I stand by that. The department has done a good job handling this case and developing the case, and will continue to do so until the case is presented to the DA.
And has Clayton Perry tried to steer this in any way, whether during the investigation or after that charge was filed, that original charge was filed?
Not with me, he hasn't.
Okay, and you haven't heard of him trying to do that with anybody else?
No.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add, Chief? That covered most of it for me.
So when the officer interviewed him on the scene, I thought he did a good job doing his due diligence, trying to get Perry to acknowledge what he believed at the time, but trying to get Perry to acknowledge that, and it just didn't happen.
So basically, unless the officer was able to get Perry to confess to being behind the wheel, he wasn't able to do anything about that with the DWI?
Correct. With the information that he had at the time, he was unable to put Perry behind the wheel. But later, developing that case, the detective was able to do that for the leaving the scene.
And that actually had been a question that I had when reading the original report. Why wasn't he able to develop that information? Had the witness left the scene, or what was the reason he wasn't able to get that information from the witness until later?
The witness gave the information to the officer as to where the vehicle was, where the driver had gone after the hit and run. And that's what the officer had at the time. No further information than that. It wasn't until later that follow-up information was developed.
Why didn't he ask at the time, who had been driving?
Why didn't he ask?
The witness.
I couldn't tell you that. I don't have that information.
Okay. That's all I need.
Okay.
Appreciate it, Chief.
All right.
Thank you very much.